And we are back with another episode of Post Game. I'm joined here with my wonderful co-host, of course. We got Stamina, and then we got a special guest here for Rostermania. Of course, we got Mauisnake here, analyst, expert in all things Counter-Strike. Another week of brilliant minds with me, so very excited for this episode. But so far, how has the player break been treating you all?
Been pretty fantastic. I've had a super busy year, so I'm
Yeah,
I'm relieved to get a few weeks off. I was in Amsterdam last weekend for the first time ever, and that was a lot of fun. So
sweet.
went to like a techno fest. But yeah, how's it been for you guys?
Yeah, but nothing crazy for me. Just playing some FPL, streaming. We don't really celebrate that too much where I'm at right now, but
Yeah.
regardless, it's always nice
Yeah.
to have a little bit of a break, regardless.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Haven't worked in a long time, so I'm excited to get back to casting because we got the like open qualifier RMR stuff coming up. But other than that, it has been very peaceful. So it's been a really good couple of weeks. Excited to get back to it. Um, so like I said, we've got Rostermania and the cards here for today's episode. So um, I wanted to split it up into different groups and Americas and Europe, which would be most interesting to us three, and then kind of talk about like the biggest changes with top 10 changes. So that's kind of the idea for this episode. So kicking it off with the Americas changes, just to give it some more organization, we can start in South America. And I wanted to talk about Cello leaving MIBR for potentially FNX over an Imperial. I think that's kind of rumored, kind of confirmed for the most part. And I'm a little bit disappointed because Cello was a good piece, and I think this was mentioned in our post-game episode for the major, but I think MIBR was, not at the namesake team that they should have been, but they were always seemingly improving. And the one note that I talked about a little bit in that episode was that they had like offensive coaches, defensive coaches, stuff like that, or like strategic coaches, things along those lines. And so I thought that was interesting. And now losing Cello, I think they lose a big piece of that infrastructure that they had. So uh, what are your thoughts? I can start with you, Stamina.
Yeah, so I feel like before we kind of spoke on how like Imperial was more of that team that was like gonna go to lands and they're gonna give you like a decent run, look like an okay team, but like overall the grand scheme of things, they weren't really gonna be like a top contender long term. But I think when you add in a guy like Cello, especially replacing FNX, who's been playing, quite rough, um, you kind of actually give a little bit of life to the Imperial roster. Now I feel like they have like a fragging trio of like Bolts, Fur, and Cello who can kind of be animals in that sense. And Cello has also been doing a little bit of in-game leading and stuff like that within MIBR. So I feel like he's a good voice too with some experience. So they can be really good. But on the other hand, MIBR is interesting because they cut their in-game leader in Woody, which I thought was just a bad decision from the
Yeah.
get-go. And then they replaced him with Brinzen, who is supposed to be this up-and-coming player who is really good, but like he's not really an operator, he's not really a rifler. I don't really know what he is. And then now they're losing the guy who was taking over IGL duties, and they're replacing that with Henny, right? So
Hmm.
I feel like they have potential to still be like a really strong team, especially regionally within South America and North America if they do play over here anymore. Um, but at the same time, I don't really know like what their long term trajectory is really set to be here now. I feel like Burnzan's a good player for development, but I really don't know.
I've actually really liked B Ereanizan on MIBR as an opera. I kind of like in the very beginning he was a little bit rocky, but then so I watched him really closely at the ECL season and a little bit, and they played a couple games at the Cologne play-in, and he was kind of the highlight player for me at those games. But unfortunately, with MIBR, when they lost Woody, they lost a lot tactically in my eyes. It always felt like when I was watching a couple of the games, especially at ECL, they didn't know where they wanted to convert late rounds, and you could see when games would get a little bit closer. Let's say they were like 26 rounds deep, 25 round, or like 26 and later, he would start getting nervous, and then they wouldn't know how they wanted to convert late rounds. And sometimes they just ran out of time on round 27. And I was just thinking to myself, man, Cello, he's a great player, but he probably isn't the guy you want for an IGL right now. So I don't know who MIBR is going to move to the IGL role. I would assume Exit just because he kind of strikes me as the guy that is a little bit brainier. It could be. I don't think there's
I
really
think it's
anybody else I
Joda.
see. Really, Jota
Yeah.
wants to do it. Okay, I will say I can't really remark on Jota's just like intelligence because he doesn't speak English, so I've never
Yeah.
been able to talk to him. He's super rough at English, so that's interesting. So maybe in Portuguese he's bringing a lot more to the table. But for Imperial side, I think this is so. I mean, this has basically been overdue in terms of what FNX was bringing in the server. It was not a lot. It was playing anchor positions, kind of being a hole on defense, and it was a reason that people wanted to play Vertigo against them every time because they know they could go B 10 times in a half, and they're probably gonna kill FNX, and he's not gonna get a single kill like 7 of those 8
Mhm.
times, or 7 or 8 times of those 10. So this is good. This is good for Imperial if people want to believe in them. I don't know who's out there really believing them outside of Brazil, but this is a little bit of a shot in the arm for them. So I'm glad that they're doing something like this. They're not gonna live and die by the Last Dance ideal that they came out with, and they're gonna actually try to improve a player.
Yeah, I think it's really good preparation from them before the major too, right? Like they got to qualify for the main stage if they want like to have that big last dance performance or whatever. So you can't have like that big of an anchor on your team if you want any chance at getting there. So I'm excited for it too, just because Cello always seemed like he was like a solid player, and now if he doesn't have to IGL as much, I think he will have his stats increase as well. So I'm looking forward to that change for them. I do think the addition of Henny might be good too. I mean, I know that you were a big fan of Henny, and he's been through a couple of rough rosters and things along those lines. Do you think he'll be able to just like pick it up a little bit in this team because of the coaching, or do you think he's gonna lack that motivation?
Motivation is always where Henny can kind of rip your heart out, but he can
Yeah,
also make you the biggest fan ever. But I think with this, it's a little bit odd to me because Henny brings a lot of experience, but I really thought BR Enizan was all right. I thought that
yeah,
he had a lot of room to grow. So to take BR Enizan out of that role is a little bit it is concerning to me, but I will say that where I like Bjarnazan a lot is when I saw him, I think in MIBR, was it Academy? Or yeah, I think he was in the Academy team, and actually he was actually doing pretty well, and I think he was rifling back then. So I'm not really that upset about Bjarnazan going back to the rifle, but I just think that he probably could have been one of the up and coming oppers for the Brazilian scene if he stayed with that role. And for Henny, I mean, I love watching Henny because what he does in the server sometimes it just blows your mind. But I also know the baggage that he brings to every team, where he's gonna probably make a push to get his brother on if things start going poorly. And if if Lucas joins this roster, I I'm not sure what the place for him is in it, because I think that the rifle core for MIBR is very good for what they put into it. Like they're ranked 26 in the world right now with a um with a pretty young core of riflers, and I don't think it needs to be upended too much. And so if they just kind of catch up to speed where they were tactically when they had Woody, whether that is Jota calling, then this team can be a top 20 team. I'm not gonna like put them at some crazy high number, but that's probably higher than I think most people would peg them for the experience or lack thereof of some of these members.
yeah. I think they were getting to that point before some of the transitions, just because I do like I think their coaching staff is very very strong there. I don't know if you've like witnessed any of like the like staff that they have on deck there at MIBR at events or anything like that. But I think that you get a young enough crew of riflers and time underneath good names. A lot can take place there in terms of like ranking increases. Um, Sam, do you have any thoughts on Henny?
I think Henny, like obviously, like Mally already pointed out, he brings a lot of upside, but it's just kind of like a question mark because I feel like kind of that move to me just screams like joining the best team available, you
Hmm.
know? Like I don't think like like looking long term, like I said, where is the trajectory for the team? And like if Jota's in game leading, like sure it could work, it could be really good, but it's like maybe like a team like this Fluxo team could have been like a good spot for him. Like I just feel like there was probably more out there for Henny, and it's always tough to look at him now, like post Furia.
Yeah.
I just feel like there's so much more for him, but we're not seeing it. So I guess it's just kind of like a question mark until we see them play.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I guess we can move on a little bit from that and talk more about not necessarily just NA ECL teams, but we can kind of highlight that as well. I want to talk about EG's main team right now, initially, because we've got a lot of interesting changes. There's always interesting stuff coming out of EG. And so they got rid of Stu, of course. After the whole debacle, they got rid of Rush, kind of struggling in stats. I was always a little bit concerned with him on this project and being able to put up numbers. But they got Hexed and Nealon, which is I'm not sure how it's gonna work out. Of course, like I always Nealon's from K23, correct? So
Yeah.
I always, whenever I would cast that team, I thought that he individually was pretty solid, but this is like a whole new domain for him. It's a whole new level for Hex as well, which I do think he's one of the players out of all of the core of EG was probably next in line. And so I think that's a great move up, and they're giving him opportunities to show his potential, but always that step up is going to be really difficult. So peeking out, what do you think EG can really make of this main roster, Maui?
So I do think that it was overdue, the need for Stewie to be removed from the team. I knew that the contracts for the team made it a very dicey situation for EG to remove Stewie, because he still basically is getting paid a lot of money to be essentially a streamer for them right now, which I don't think was ever their objective when they made the signing for themselves. But I think that Hex is a really cool move up, because to me, he's easily been the most consistent player for that, I guess, Carpe Diem RBG lineup for such
Yeah.
a long time, that he was, in my eyes, I'd say he was frequently the guy I would be looking at to be like the next one of the top 5 riflers in the sort of ECL space that deserve a chance at making it to the jump up. So for them to give it to him now might be a little bit premature, but it's better now than never. So I'm very happy that he's getting his shot here. I have straight up so little to say about Nealon in terms of his calling style, because when I watched K23, I really probably only looked at them really closely at FunSpark at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And I never felt like K23 was actually winning because of sick calls. I always was more so looking at certain individuals like the X5, the Steam
Yeah.
Authenticator code guy, or the or like Norbert to deliver for them. So I wasn't really keen on him being an IGL, and I also don't know how well he speaks English. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much can get lost in translation here. We see other teams lately that are having trouble switching to their second language, and for your in-game leader to have to do it, it's probably the hardest role to have to move to a new team to, if you're gonna speak a language that you weren't on your last one.
Yeah, I think for me, when I look at this new roster, it's like exciting, but it's also like exciting for the wrong reasons, kind of. Like you don't look at them and instantly think, oh, like EG's back to the top, right? But you're like, okay, now we get to see Hex play. This is really cool. They're just bringing in fresh faces, which is cool. I guess one take from it that's kind of interesting is that Nealon is quite young, right? So like, I mean, he kind of fits like the trajectory of like EG trying to build this blueprint project that's like for the future. But what I kind of like dislike about the team overall is how it feels like 1 foot out, 1 foot in, where like they're trying to kind of go like that um old Gambit youngsters route, trying to like take some young prospects and develop them, but at the same time they've got like a lot of older guys like, Cirque and Breezy, of course. And I just feel like to me, it seems like a super short term decision. Like I don't know like what the trajectory is for a guy like Hext on that team, and I feel like his success isn't really going to be like driven by what he can do. It's going to be like how good the team is in general with him, right? Like he's going to have to show that he's like worthy of playing at this level, but at the same time, it's gonna be an uphill battle from the start. And I feel like I just feel like, you hear the rumors of like, Breezy and Cirque, their contracts were ending like very soon, like September, I believe. And there could have been a world where EG just cut the crap on like the main roster, picked up, Neil and Still to in-game lead, but then just surrounded him with like these younger North American prospects and tried to build like that next like youngster type of team. And I thought that could have been really cool. But right now they're kind of hovering in some weird murky water where they're like 1 foot in, 1 foot out of being like a tier one team, And I feel like if we see a resurgence of like Cirque, Breezy, and Automatic, sure, this could work. But if we don't see that resurgence, and it's like it seems super short term. So I don't know. It's exciting nonetheless, but I just don't know for sure that it's going to work long term. I do like it though. I like it because it's something new. They're trying something that other people don't really try. It's hard to hate on that completely, especially North America.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I think is always a caveat with every move that they make is that, it requires that Breezy and Cirque come back to their like best form possible. And at this point, don't know if that's ever gonna happen. Like no matter what IGL steps in the role, I thought maybe Stewie would give up a little bit of motivation to them and help out in that department. That didn't go over well at all. I don't think things really changed. And I don't even know if it's a motivation issue at this time because I see Cirque like always in the DMs, and I've heard that he's always in the DMs from every like pro out there. So I don't know what really can fix it other than it might just be a consistent issue at this point because Hex shouldn't be the one that has to be stepping into this team with names like Cirque and Breezy as riflers and Automatic for that matter. He's still been very solid compared to the rest of the team, but yeah, I don't. I just imagine that this, at least in the early stages, with whatever sort of language barriers are going to take place as an IGL, moving in with English-speaking players, I can't imagine that this is going to move them up any positions for EG.
No, that's impossible to think is going to happen because I mean, just looking at who they have to play coming up in the Blast groups, they're in such a poor bracket for themselves. Like they have to play FaZe first, and they have to play the loser between Heroic and Big. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not winning a map at that event, and then you go into Pro League, and I mean, I'm not super. I think they can maybe win maps in the other group that they're joining, but it's still like it's actually a very tough group. If people don't know, it's like C9, Movistar, Liquid, Fury, Eternal Fire. Maybe maybe they get something off Eternal Fire. Maybe they get something off of a weakened Movistar. But the other teams, they're not touching them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Furia potentially with their kind of struggling presence too. I could see that, but yeah, that's just like a rough draw for your first two events. And if you just keep losing, I feel like it's hard to get out of that cycle as well. You want to start off a roster in kind of that honeymoon period. Otherwise, again, there's like a motivation thing that can set in very quickly if you just don't win in the early stages, specifically for NA teams as well, right? So yeah, that's gonna be tricky. Oof. So we can move on to the ECL team, which I'm a big fan of. So, of course, Hex got the move up, so he's off of like the EG Carpe Diem roster, I think is what HLTV calls it, and Classia, for I think kind of the same reasons he got removed on RBG's roster, just kind of familiar problems. I think he's always had a little bit of a struggle with attitude, so he got removed as well, and they add in Stan and Rush, and this is kind of that roster that I think I kind of wanted to see out of Orgless. At the time, it was like with Swisher Daps. It was supposed to be Rush at one point. They had Minus, so they had a bunch of young players that were hot and like prospects initially, and then they had like a really good supportive element in Rush that could probably, I imagine, be like a good mentor to these players, and then like an IGL that has brought up a lot of players. Daps, I think, maybe more so than Stan, just because Stan wins events with the players Daps brings up, but Stan, I think, still is going to be a great example for them. So I'm very excited to see this team with the core of Walco, Wiz, and Chop.
Yeah, I mean, I have like a take on it that I think is like probably shared by a lot of people who've been around NA for a long time, but like when I was coming up, I constantly got to watch like these up and comers play with like Ocean.
Yeah.
I got to watch up and comers play with like all these different in-game leaders who helped develop them, right? You even saw Sean Garris kind of dip his foot in a little bit when he was playing with guys like Rix, and even past that, like he was playing with like I think at one point like he played with Wrath, I do believe. I can't remember exactly, but like you had Rogue playing with Wrath for
Yeah.
sure, like Hiko and those guys. Point is, right? Like we had these older vets who kind of developed these younger guys, and like for the last 3 years, we haven't like had that at all. And so regardless of what the blueprint's trajectory is and everything, because that's just a whole different thing. Because they can't play the RMRs, they can't,
Mhm.
go to major stuff like that. It's weird. But at the same time, there is nothing negative that can come from Rush and Stan playing with 3 prospective players in the region. Like it's only a good thing
Mhm.
long term. You look at it like 6 to 12 months from now, those 3 players could be playing with 2 other players, and that experience is going to be worthwhile and it's going to go a long way. So I feel like it's a really really good thing. um and not to quote chat, but I'm not comparing Stan to Ocean, but I'm just saying like having that ability to have some vets develop a little bit more, I think is really beneficial, and it's only a positive.
Mhm.
For what they can do, obviously they are still quote unquote an academy team, although EG kind of brands them as one 15-man roster, but it's still really cool to see. I think it's a good thing.
It's definitely good for knowledge to be passed down to the next generation, and that's exactly what's going to happen with Rush and Stan. How they can help mentor these guys. It's actually in terms of the way that EG is structuring this, where they kind of now have, I would say, one team that basically does what you have wanted, Stamina, to have a veteran presence to who could just disperse knowledge to some of these younger guys. The only thing I kind of wish would have happened is that, like, Walco was the in-game leader for this team before, right?
Yes.
Um, so that's it's a little bit weird that they got rid of Clasia, because even though I know that there have been sort of issues with his personality and how he interacts with other people, it would have been nice for what was a undisputed like prospect, and people like myself were very much so fans of him. I think like Launders and I both liked watching Classia
Yeah.
play when we saw him on, because we knew that this guy was very good, and so all the stuff outside the server can actually be remedied a little bit when you're working with older people, when you
Mhm.
have a like I don't when you're like basically that maturity, it actually kind of comes through where everybody can benefit from it. So even if like he's having those issues, I would have personally liked to see them give him another chance or
Yeah.
give him a little bit longer shot there, because it's disappointing. Like I don't know what he's doing next. I'm sure another ECL level team should want to take the risk on him, but for him to not get the mentorship that I felt like he really needed, that is a huge missed opportunity for him and possibly this team too. Because Walco, if Stan is coming in as the leader, then I don't necessarily know Walco's place. I guess he's okay on domestic matchups. Like he's not like he's not like a super bot, but he's just all right.
Mhm.
Whereas you could have had a guy that takes a lot as a potential up and coming star.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was one thing I think I heard like Valance had worked pretty closely with Classy in terms of some of his like, you know, like overcoming rage and stuff like that. But um I agree. I think that they had potential to really work through that, because you said like Hex as a top 5 rifler in AECL, like there's no doubt that Classy was in that running as well. As like if there was like a positive attitude, I guess, more so than the issues internally, then I think that Classia could make a really good case to move up alongside Hex potentially, depending on like which riflers dropped out, because he's like up there in the skill level as well. But yeah, I mean, you played like an online event with him at one point, right? And I
Yeah,
know it
yeah.
was
I
just a
played a
substitute
qualifier
thing.
with him. Yeah.
But I can imagine like it is easier to like level your emotions when you have people that are probably better at dealing with them at an older age. For sure. So I was disappointed to see that as well.
Yeah, I mean, all I played with Classia before was a little qualifier, so I think we played probably like maybe three BO3s together,
Yeah.
and the way we lost out of that qualifier was frustrating, and he kind of got. I mean, he kind of got mad, but we all kind of got mad because
Yeah.
I didn't think it was. To me, I didn't think it was anything extraordinary
Mhm.
when he got frustrated because we were losing and
Yeah.
we were all kind of like pissed at the situation. If I didn't know his reputation for getting frustrated for some, I guess, raging or whatever it is,
Mhm.
then I would have thought literally nothing of it at all. So that's my take on that. But I'm sure there's tons of people that know more and have worked with him much closer than I have.
Mhm. Yeah. We can move on to the 88K contract situation. This is like very new, and I think it just came out today. I was looking on Dust 2, and yeah, this came out at 1 p.m. today, so like about an hour and a half ago. Apparently, there's a couple players still stuck in South Africa and Sweden. I mean, obviously, like the South African player, Mistum and Fady, and then probably Bowden stuck in Sweden during the player break. But right now, they haven't flown out yet to play in the open qualifiers, which are starting, I believe, on the 15th. So, obviously, some problems there in terms of like contract negotiation. Something going on there that's a little bit worrisome for that ATK roster. Like if they don't make it back in for this qualifier, like that's first of all just kind of a big almost mismanagement on ATK's part if they do plan on keeping this roster, and if not, like I don't know, I feel like that also is still on ATK. I think that's a communication that needs to be made if players are being sent home during that, and there's such a big event coming up.
Yeah, from my look on it, it's pretty disheartening because they're definitely like a top team in the region, especially right now, considering that the only Brazilian team signed up for the RMR qualifiers in NA is Team One. ATK was probably a surefire team to qualify right away out of the first qualifier, and now it's possible that they could even miss the first two. Is what I've heard. Um, Basically, like it just kind of sucks because it's just like it's another like NACS moment. Like it's pretty much on the side of the organization. Um, they are in some sort of contract negotiation period. Um, but you know, I don't want to like touch too much on it because I have the luxury of speaking with some of the guys, but I think it's a little bit deeper than maybe what the article is even showing.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of unfortunate. I really wish those guys the best because they've shown to be probably the best North American team for sure, outside of like the tier one organizations and the Brazilian teams for sure.
Mhm.
And they've been working really hard for this, and I think for sure they would qualify, no doubt in my mind. Even if they make it back and can only play the last qualifier, I'd be pretty confident saying they should qualify. But just having that pressure on their back, I also know that unfortunately, the way things are set up for them, I do believe the South African players brought their personal PCs to Mexico. So right now during the player break, they're quite literally not even playing the game because they don't have an option to. So it's very tough. It's very tough, and it just doesn't look good on this organization. So, but it sucks. Yeah.
Then wait, wow, I didn't know that. Okay,
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
came out like just
Yeah.
an hour or so ago.
Yeah.
okay. Well, for them to not have their PCs during the player break is kind of incredible for me because I mean nowadays I feel the player break because I'm working in these kinds of the tier one events, but
Mhm.
before I didn't even know there was like a player. I didn't know there was a player break. Like
Yeah.
that didn't
Yeah.
exist to me. It
As like
was
an
just keep
ECL player or
grinding.
what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Even
Yeah.
even in my first like couple seasons of ECL and whatever. I mean, I knew the time between
Yeah.
seasons, but I didn't know that there was like this tier one player break. That
Yeah.
meant nothing to me. So that was just grind time, and hopefully you work harder in that period than
Yeah.
everybody else. So that's like your off season, I guess, to get better. And, okay, for them to not have it, people are probably going to level up behind them because I know they did pretty well at ECL last season. Like they came in second,
They were
so
very, very good at the end of the player break.
yeah, they so for them to not be able to practice for this entire time, for the qualifier to be coming up, they are in a dire position that really I just hope this stuff gets sorted. I've too heard things a little bit about this ATK org and things not getting settled in a timely manner, but I think that's unfortunately the nature of a lot of tier 2 organizations in general and throughout history. Like it's very tough to be on, like, now that I kind of even almost have sympathy for orgs because I know that they're just kind of dumping funds into things that aren't usually giving them anything back, it's
Mhm.
tough to like be too hard out on them. But I think things need to be just very much so forward. Where I skimmed the article like just now, and it seems like they were saying that well, once all the ink is dry, then we'll get them back in time. But it's like this
This is
kind
like
of
the
just needed to
biggest
happen
deal
earlier.
for a tier 2 of team, right? Like
Yeah.
making the major and getting sticker money is everything to ATK.
Yeah.
Like that's their way to make their money back. And if
And
that,
ironically, yeah, touching on your point too, Mal, you said they they don't really bring a return for organizations like this usually. Like this is the major. This is like the one
Yeah,
thing that it
right.
actually makes most sense. Like if I was them, I'd be like, screw the contract for now. Like let's get you
yeah.
back. Figure it out while you're there. Like yeah, it's tough.
Mhm. Not
Yeah.
great. Not great. Very worrisome. For sure. And so kind of wrapping up our ECL talk, I kind of want to touch on gaming gladiators as well. They got rid of Carson. They added in 60. This was a move I wasn't really expecting, to be honest. I didn't really think that this team was gonna make a move like that. I feel like Carson was such a like core member, but getting rid of him and adding in 60, it seems like is what they're going for, and I can't really complain. I always like know that 60 is gonna be a very stable member in their team as much as he's motivated to do so. I mean, you know this better than anyone, Stamina. But I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Because Carson was kind of there for so long. I imagine they had a lot of ideas around his ability and his role in the team. So, what do you think this change is gonna move or replace this team?
Yeah, I mean, Carson, he's an extremely vocal player too, very assertive. I know that Cynic was their in-game leader, but I know that Carson really definitely worked as a secondary leader. I'd say kind of like the silver lining here is that like Danny is exactly that player as well. Whether he's opping or rifling, and as far as I'm aware, he's going to be rifling on this team. Cynic will remain opping. Um, so I think Danny's kind of going to slot in like perfectly in terms of roles, but I don't know if he's going to necessarily bring more impact than Carson, one for one. Like I almost feel like they're just very similar players in that sense. So I don't know that their team necessarily got better, but I do know that they were looking to make some changes throughout the offseason. At one point, they were rumored playing with like Stanislaw, and they were looking to change up the roster a little bit. But um, yeah, I'm not really sure. Carson did leave the team, and his reasoning was pretty much he just didn't really like their trajectory. So I don't know. It's kind of like one of those situations where, like in NA, when a roster change happens, like you just pick the best player available. You don't
Yeah,
really look at the intangibles. You don't really look at exactly how it's going to work. You just say, this guy has a better rating than everybody else on our list. We're going to grab him. And that's kind of what it is to me. It's nothing crazy. I don't think it's going to drastically make them better or worse in any scenario, but I think it does say something about their team a little bit just because their core was Carson, George, Cynic for so long, and every other player that came in or out was revolving around those three. So it always sucks when you see a core breakup.
Yeah, I always thought that I guess if I really go one to one on these players, I would always have thought 60 was a little bit better in the fragging department, but seeing how many lineups Carson was on that ended up doing pretty well by ECL standards, I always thought that he's a pretty valuable piece too. But I think you already shed some insight on what they are actually like, and it's to hear that it's a one for one is not too disappointing. I guess like you really like 60s like the news that bubbles up always about 60 nowadays is in such a negative light, but it's still pretty undeniable that he produces a lot when he's in the server.
Yeah.
yeah. And also, I mean, this season of ECL is, I mean, I feel like their competition is going to be EG, MIBR, uh, and that might be it. Like, that is, I mean, Team 1 with Malps could be their competition as well, right? Like, I don't know any other teams that are going to be taking them on. ATK, obviously, but I don't know how that's shaping up, what that's going to look like, if everyone's going to make it back. But other than 4 or 5 teams, like this team is in competition to close it out, and if that's their goal, they definitely are getting closer to achieving it. If 60 can just keep on producing numbers like he typically does.
Yeah, and I think like the RMR qualities will be like a good test for them as well because theoretically, in my opinion, I don't think it should change anything. They should certainly make the RMR.
Mhm.
With everything going on right now, I think that game in Gladiators roster should still make the RMR. So if they somehow crash and burn and don't make the RMR, then I guess that's like their easiest red flag. But yeah, you're right. Throughout ECL, it's not really going to change too much. This is one of the weakest seasons in
Yeah.
history. And yeah, so I think they should still be pretty strong overall.
For sure. For sure. All right. I guess we can talk a little bit about Team One because that is interesting. I did see someone in chat say forgot Payne. Payne is not playing ECL this season. They are in advanced, I think, and I don't even know if they're playing advanced. So
Yeah, they're not playing advanced. They don't have visas, and it is rumored through the grapevine that a lot of these Brazilian teams may not be making long-term returns. But
okay.
that's just rumor at the moment. I don't have any solid proof of that. But apparently, a lot of these Brazilian teams are going to stay in Brazil for the foreseeable future potentially. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll see.
That would be interesting. And we could talk a little bit about Team One because Malbs is reuniting, and I think this was a move that they desperately needed. They were a shell of themselves when Malbs left. It just looked like they never really found like a fit replacement. They got like there's still a very strong core. I like all of the Team One guys. Like we both got to meet them at the Frag event earlier this year, and very cool. But it just didn't seem like their new replacements ever came near like the hole that Malbs left, and it's kind of to be expected because he's such a good player. But now that he's joining back, I imagine that they will get a little bit of a boost and both like motivation to play because this is kind of their star that they were working around, and I imagine that Malbs is going to bring a little bit of energy back into this team as well.
I mean, he's already signed up for whether it's a rumor or not that he's on. He's already signed up for the RMR with them.
Mhm.
So that's. I mean, it seems like he's probably just joining.
Yeah.
So that I think this is kind of unfortunately it's a step back for Malbs because he was playing on that Godsent. It wasn't the Godsent lineup. It was the 0-0 Nation lineup, and he just never could really find his footing on that team. And I guess this will be kind of one of the gems that I leave for this show is just that Malbs kind of told me that really after they lost out of that event, he told me over breakfast that what wasn't working for him on that team is that, and a few people on that team, is that the way that they were playing, the style that Cold was calling was more like Cold was kind of, there was structure, but it wasn't like really dense structure, and it wasn't and Malbs was more used to kind of a looser defaulty style with Maluk calling, and so like when you look at that 0-0 Nation lineup, Try wasn't having the best time on that team with cold calling because he was used to way more structure. Malbs was used to much less structure, and then Cole was just kind of in between, and it wasn't really working for anybody.
Mhm.
And now that he's able to go back to a team with Maluk, who he's played under for so many years, you expect that he's going to be able to farm again, which is kind of fun because it's always fun to see Malbs in ECL just destroying everybody, especially given the fact that TRK is also on this lineup too. And if you look at the firepower on this roster, it's pretty darn high. And I'm not as familiar with IDK, but I know Pesadello and basically everybody else on this roster, and I think that this is kind of now a team that people have to watch out for as one of those teams that's in the mix to, I'd say, potentially win ECL or at least be a top 2 team, top 3 team.
Yeah, I have to agree. I'm glad that Malbs is back, and again, like it's always fun to see him farm. I was really disappointed to see that 0-0 Nation team kind of struggle, just because I was so excited to see Try and Malbs unite as like two young South American players, and I don't think really either one of them lived up to their full potential in that roster. But now that he's back, I'm excited. And as for IDK, I think he's not gonna be shining too much, but he'll fit in somewhat nicely in this team as well. So I haven't seen anything like crazy from him. I think I casted a couple of like the challenger qualifiers with him playing in it, but he was just kind of a Team 1 was like so so bad when I was casting them with IDK that I don't really have a fair judgment of him.
Yeah, I think their new roster, what it also does, it takes a little bit of pressure off Maluke. When
Mhm.
I was first coming up, I mean, Maluke's been on Team One since what, like 2015. It's actually been his entire career pretty
Yeah,
much, and he was performing like an absolute animal at first,
6 years.
and yeah, and I feel like in recent times, especially the last 2 years, and you don't have to be a genius to look at his HLTV and see, but like he hasn't really been performing that way. But I also feel like he's been kind of in this period where he's been developing like um some different talents from Brazil. With like PRT and XNS, and like they had Keys come in, like all these different players who are like a little bit younger. And so right now I feel like they're in a good spot where you have IDK who's quite experienced. I don't know, I'm surprised you don't remember actually, Melly, but IDK was on like the original Team One that ever came over here. Um,
Oh.
and yeah, he was on the very first iteration. Actually, anyways, long story. But yeah, he was on the original iteration, and then he was removed, and I believe I can't remember who replaced him, but he left. And so now they have IDK who's extremely experienced. They have Pesa who's been kind of like their secondary star through every iteration of the roster. And then they have Malbs coming back, who's going to be like kind of like that hard carry again. I feel like this is the best Team One we've seen in a long time. Um, with TRK, and they just have so much firepower. So I guess it's just really going to be interesting to see what they can do, because if Maluke doesn't have to do a lot of micromanagement, if he's got better players individually to kind of like hold their own in their spots, then I think he's going to be able to really do a lot more, which could do a lot for them. So hopefully, um, hopefully they'll be a bit better. But I think they're going to be definitely a team to watch out for a little bit more, especially considering they're staying in NA, like unlike their counterparts. Like all these other Brazilian teams are potentially going home, and if they're staying here, I think they're definitely going to play well. So. And I actually do stand corrected. IDK wasn't on the original. He came in 2016, Luca in 2015. So he was on like one of the earliest iterations nonetheless. But
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay.
All right. I think that covers all that I've got for ECL. Really, I think that pretty much does it. There's a lot of new teams in ECL this season, like you said, that might be like the least competitive, just because of some of the dropouts. But yeah, I mean, for some of the teams that have kind of vitalized, I'm excited to see how they do. E.g. Carpe Diem is going to be an exciting team to catch out. So, yeah, looking forward to watching that season. But we can move on to Europe. There are some very interesting changes, and I want this to be like kind of separate between like Europe and then the top 10 changes that we're going to see, because we can kind of go into that a little more with a little more like nuance or whatever. But I kind of want to kick it off with the more recent news here, is that Shox is going to be joining that Apex roster, which I think is like an A+ move, because this was kind of where I think Shox needed to go when he left Vitality. I know that he kind of left Vitality in like a high form, but I guess just joining like a North American team specifically was probably not the best idea for him. But joining like, also a tier 1 organization that's going to expect results is also not the best idea. Like he needs to be doing something similar to what Rush is doing now, where he's helping out, not even young and up and coming players, but kind of tier 2, tier 3 European teams that, can cover and maybe make events through qualifiers, but are definitely not getting these spots like invited to or anything like that.
Yeah, this is good. This is really good for Shox and his life, because I think
Yeah.
it came out publicly about all the stuff that didn't go right for him for Liquid, in terms of he tried signing his kid up, or like his stepson up, for school in America, couldn't actually go to America, and so his wife and his stepson had to be away from him when he was in America playing for some reason, and just the kind of cycle. He was basically just like constantly getting screwed with in terms of what could and couldn't happen in terms of his family being close to him. So now he finally gets to be in Europe, and I think that like you said, a roster where he's just kind of in the tier 2 space is great for basically what he can provide, because when when Apex lost Asilian, I don't know, in some ways, with them not performing well, I would see something like that coming, because eventually someone's just going to think I can call, and so Stiko taking up the mantle there is great, because even though that Stiko, if I'm not mistaken, it's his first time picking up the IGL role, Seiko's kind of never really been a big fragger. People have always like really. I think people like Stiko a lot more than Stiko's actually a sick player.
Yeah.
He's just one of those guys who has a really great reputation because everybody says he's a great teammate. He always does what the team needs in order to succeed. And so for him to see his career trajectory kind of move in the way of Taco, where he was already a support player, kind of doing whatever was wanted of him, then to realize that the best way I can contribute is be a slightly better fragging in-game leader than the typical guy. That's cool because now he's got a veteran voice in Shocks that can really walk him through some of these things about like here were things in Vitality how we did it. These are things how we did it in Liquid. And so for him to be another vocal figure is such a huge plus because that's exactly what Liquid said he was so good at. The things that Liquid
Yeah.
praised Shocks about the most were always like, oh, he's helping us discover our team philosophy, how we need to play all these situations. He's really good at giving macro suggestions in the middle of a game. Like, but it wasn't his fragging. It was never
Yeah.
his ability. So for him to play it tier 2 Shocks, he's probably going to be able to frag just fine for that level, and he's going to be such a huge additive component
Yeah.
to their calling style.
Yeah, I have to agree as well. Like, I think it's like an A+ move for them because when you look at like that team as well, I mean, they were never building to be like this powerhouse tier 1 team. They're kind of like a long-term project kind of thing. And I feel like bringing in a guy like Shocks can only be good for, especially for like younger guys like JL and Knock. Knock has relative experience, but hasn't really been playing at the top for a while. And I feel like it's a good thing for sure, especially to help a guy like Stiku who's gonna be a new in-game leader. It's like good to have that secondary voice. So I really like it. Um, I still think that Apex is probably gonna hover around like that top 20 area, like, at best, probably, but they could have a really bright future, especially depending on how, like, a guy like JL can develop because
Mhm.
he's actually quite talented. Watching him play in, like, that Mad Lions roster, which was really weird, but it was really cool to see that, and, you never know what you're gonna see, and also role-wise, like, when you look at Liquid, you knew exactly who was kinda playing what roles, and it was really hard for Shox to come in and maybe have, like, full impact that he could, and I feel like coming into a team like Apex, like, there's a lot more room for him to actually do his thing. So, who knows? Maybe we could see even like a buffed up version of what we saw of Shox on Liquid as well. Like he might just completely play like way better. So
Mhm.
it'd be interesting for sure. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm excited to see him join up with JL because I did get to cast like a lot of JL. I guess this was kind of towards the end of like the actual signed Mad Lions roster, but he when there was like no pressure on him was kind of a monster. Like he was performing out of his mind on that team. So I think that they can hover it around, but I think they're gonna start qualifying for a lot of these events. Maybe with Shocks as an addition. And become like a way more deadly team. So I have to agree. I'm super pumped, and this is exactly what I wanted Shocks to do when he left Vitality. This is like the perfect roster move for him, I think. But we can move on. Obviously, next up, Jax gonna be heading out and of G2 that is, and heading into Heat, which is another I think roster move that kind of needed to be made. G2 has like so many stars. And I know that you did a pretty cool like article that we'll get into later on HLTV, but I feel like G2 has so many stars. Not that Jax was like a massively lacking player. I actually think he was playing individually better than he had ever played before in some of these events. But he's now out joining Heat, and I think this is more of his speed, and I think he'll do really well because of the attitude and like maybe like the encouragement that is probably needed on Heat after a little while of struggling.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you take it. You could take it.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say like I kind of hated to see Jax out of G2, not because like it doesn't make some sort of sense, just because I feel like he's just such a glue guy and you love him. Like
Mhm.
he's got to be like the most liked tier 1 pro at the moment probably. Like the guy like there's nothing to like really hate about him. And like it makes sense that they would move away from him, but I think going to Heat on the flip side of that is really cool for him because now he gets to go back to um, a full French roster. And he also gets to play with guys that he literally said years ago that if he was not on G2, that's where he would go. So, like, he's got to be extremely happy. He's also going to play a huge role in that team in terms of like leadership and having that expertise. And they're like they're like a really good team actually, who I feel like could be poised to maybe become like maybe the next like Movistar Riders in a sense. Like they have like a lot of talent and they have like leadership and roles work out. Like they could be really, really good. So I really like it. It's interesting. Anytime you see like a player step down from like a or not step down, but like go from like a tier one team like top 5, top 10 and drop down into like the top 20, top 30 range. Because like I feel like the impact that they can make is just crazy. Like
Mhm.
it's actually crazy. I feel like the gaps are a lot bigger than maybe the fans always realize. So I feel like him going there is really good. Um, but also sad to see him out of G2 because I really liked him there. So.
I actually think that this Heat move for them is pretty sick because it felt like for me, well, when I was looking at Heat most closely, it was definitely when they were still called Double Pony, and since then I've just kind of maybe had a game kind of on second monitor, like in the last handful of months, but just looking at some of their results. The fact that they won this Elisa Invitational was over what Bad News Eagles, and everybody was so
Yeah.
hyped about Bad News Eagles and their run at the major and everything. That's super impressive. And then they are able to take down Entropic, K23 following that. This team is definitely not a joke, and this team is in a position now where it's kind of similar to what we were talking about with Shocks, where they're getting another veteran sort of voice that can bring things to the table that maybe other people didn't catch on to when they're looking at some of the demos and just how the inner workings of some of those high level games. So for Jax to find this landing spot, it just couldn't be better for him. And really for Heat, I think if Lucky isn't producing in the server, which he was before, from what I gathered when I watched them before, he was kind of taking up space and resources enough that if he wasn't just like all out your best player, getting someone like Jax in that spot is probably just going to help you out because he's going to be a better teammate, and he's probably like this maybe even frees up other players on Heat to do better than they have done lately.
Yeah, that's why I'm so excited. I mean, alongside the fact that he's again just such a glue player, like the release video that G2 made for him was awesome. So I'm excited to see this team again. I haven't casted too much of them, just because I don't know if they really do like some of the like relog stuff that I cast every once in a while. So, they're more so in like the qualifications for like Melbourne and stuff, and the Eliza event was pretty big for them as well, like you said. But I'm hoping that they can be like very similar to the next Movie Star Riders, where they just have that really good core of French players.
They do also have a really nice pro league group. I was looking at it just now. Ents, Complexity, Astralis, Heroic, and Maus. I only hear one team off the top of my head that's like for sure. I don't think they're gonna be in Heroic. Like I think everybody, and even Heroic, who knows? Like we haven't really seen much out of Heroic since their roster change.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully the player break and some prep has been good to them. But like honestly, who's to say they can't make it out of that group for sure? Like that, they have a good opportunity, and they're gonna be fired up. So yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be really cool to see.
Exciting stuff. Can move on. Next up to, as we talk about Movie Star Writers, I believe they're in the top 10, but we'd still touch on them. Just because they did kind of lose one of their big pieces here in their opera, and that obviously was a big portion of it. I think he was like, as of the last 3 months, one of the top lane rated players. And now they're no longer working with him. That's gonna be a big like blow to a team that's just been on the rise. But obviously, it's maybe a move that Senpai has had to kind of make, as everyone was kind of on that train. Like, I guess you got to get off while the train is hot, and that's where he was. Even though the team was very good, like having opportunities, more salary, I'd have to imagine for wherever he goes. I think it was rumored that he's going to Ints. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if that comes true, I do think like if you duo up with Spinks, that's gonna look very good if Spinks is still staying on that roster as well. But give me your thoughts on what sort of Movie Star writers that we're gonna see out of them, because I kind of took a look into their newer pickup, and it seems like they've got like a potential player that could maybe in a couple of years try and mirror Sunpius, but it's far from it for sure. Like he's gonna need some time before he can really get used to the level that V-Star Riders was at with Sunpius.
This is everything Sun Pius just has to do.
Yeah.
Because you're probably as a player from Movistar Riders, you're never gonna recapture this magic, or the likelihood of it is so slim that you need to just get the bag while you can, hopefully, and set him up with a really nice contract, and then he can just kind of play. I mean, he can speak English. Like that's one thing. Like he actually, I've talked to this guy. He's always basically the guy that Movistar send out when they need to have an English interview done.
Yeah.
So he's really he's probably gonna be fine. Like he's and also the thing is that everybody on Movistar have basically played on an international roster when they were playing with Smooya
Mhm.
prior to this. So it's not like I guess Sunpius wasn't on that roster technically, but the thing is that even though they all spoke English with Smooya, they don't even want to do English interviews, and they still trust Sunpius to be better.
Yeah.
Like he will do fine on Ents, but I think that this is kind of a move. Like I see this from Ence's perspective, and I don't think this is I don't think this is as strong as a move as they might think it is. Where Hades was occasionally a weak link for them. It's just that Sun Pius, I described him once as I said this to OJ Borg, and he actually used it on the intro for this TV. I was like, yeah, he's kind of like the Spanish device. Like he just moves to the right spot and he hits
Yeah.
some simple shots. Like he's not gonna blow you away. He's not like, but the thing is, he's not actually as good as Device because his T sides are so much worse than Devices are.
Yeah.
So that's where things get a little bit tricky. But if there's any IGL now that I trust can just take somebody who doesn't really get T sides and just throw them into a system that is not too hard to follow. It's probably Snappy in terms of top IGLs in the top 10 right now. Like he does a lot of set pieces. He does calls out a spawn. They've been defaulting a little bit more lately, but I assume they have to move away from defaulting if they're gonna lose Hades and they're going to lose Spinks. So I think they're going to have to go back to that original Snappy style that he kind of just whips together for every lineup in the first couple months with them before he builds out the playbook to include more advanced defaults. So this is probably this is just like a great situation for him. Just kind of feel bad for Ents overall in that they're probably losing their star player. But I guess if we want to touch on that, we can move there in a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can kind of cover. Do you all have anything? I know there was plenty of moves, but do you have anything else you want to touch on before we move to more of the top 10 changes? Because we can hop over there if you want.
I'm trying to think of like what other crazy changes there were. I mean, like, there's nothing really that pressing. I mean, there's like this new roster, this new like Belkin roster, but I don't really know anything about anybody outside of Emmy, really.
Yeah,
or
I saw
Sussul.
that as well.
I mean, it's a cool roster, but yeah, nothing really that I could say much about them. But
Yeah, we can. I mean, we
yeah,
can
that's
hop
pretty much it. I
into.
think we can hop into the top 10.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, you can go ahead. That was one thing that I was interested in. Like, obviously, Spinks is going to be leaving this roster, and Sunpai is joining it at this time. It does make sense, right? You're getting probably increased payment, like all of that. It's a move that you have to make. I don't think that we'll continue to see Movistar Riders perform as well as they did. I think that was like a massive overperformance from them. But, now what do you kind of expect out of Ents? Because if they do lose Spinks, and I think that's not necessarily confirmed, but pretty close to it. What are we expecting they can kind of muster up? Because I saw one I'm not gonna say like very confirmed rumor, but maybe potentially Nerds joining in place of Spinks, and like that could be a solid option, but it's still far from like the star that they had.
Yeah, I think like somebody said in chat too that Nerds is apparently potentially replacing Spinks, and I think you said like that came from a report from like a Blix GG
Blix,
or
yeah.
I don't really know, but let's just humor it. Like
Yeah,
maybe Nerds is
yeah.
going to Ents, like maybe. I mean it was between like I think like the other rumor was like Lonks maybe from like Sprout like was being targeted. I don't really know, right? Like I don't feel like Ents obviously has pull, but like it was always gonna be somebody at that level anyways, like a Nerds or a Lonks or somebody like that. And I feel like it's tough because um you're not gonna replace Spinks, but what I think you do have, and I think some people sometimes forget, is that like Madden was really, really good
Mhm.
when they're picking him up, and he's like a really hot prospect. But then he was kind of like in the shadows of this like Dia Spinks rifling duo mixed in with like Hades would have great performances, right? So like I feel like when you lose a guy like Spinks, Dia can take a lot more of like those roles because they kind of shared those roles on a lot of maps. Like, and then also you have Madden who can step up. So I think they're still gonna be a fine team.
Yeah.
It really I think it probably depends more on like how Sunpius performs than it does on like whoever their new fifth is because they will probably get somebody who has hot hands and really good rifle skills. And you know, they have some options it seems. If they were to get Nerds, I don't even hate it. It's not terrible. I think he's a great player. If they were to get a guy like Lonks, I think that'd be probably even better, but who knows? I don't really know what's going on over there in Sprout. But regardless, I think like ENCE is kind of always gonna be that, like, top 10, top 15, like, farm team where, like, players are gonna get really good at ENCE and then, like, get stolen, and, like, we're already seeing it. It's kind of unfortunate, but, um, I don't know. I think they're still gonna be, like, a really good team, obviously, but without, like, solid being for sure of like who their actual fix is, it's hard or fifth is, it's hard to
Yeah.
say. I will say, funny enough, Alex, to your point of Sunpies being like the Spanish device, Doran had posted a tweet during the Liquid matchup, and he said how Sunpies like he's like go back and watch the game. He's like he's hitting very pedestrian shots. He's very just like he's a great at positioning himself and like just hitting like the ones you need to hit. I actually did go back and I watched the entire VO3 just watching him, and like it's actually completely true. I think like Hades, like there's not that much of an upgrade there, like you said, and
Yeah.
I feel like if we do see more out of Sunpius, like maybe he could be more activated, like maybe his system limited him. Maybe there's more to be here in ENCE, so maybe they could be really good, but I'm not really sure. I feel like they're still always gonna hover on that like top 10, top 15 pretty much forever, I think, with the pieces that they have at the moment. So
Right. I don't. I Well, I don't know why Ends did this actually to
yeah.
get Sunpius. It feels kind of like a lateral move
Yeah.
where he's just he. I think he's better at taking CT side initiative than Hades was. That's probably how I'd put it. He probably is a little bit better at making a judgment call in the mid round and moving somewhere else on the map than Hades was. Like I was actually pretty surprised when I looked at Hades demos. This was prior to Dallas. At Dallas, I kind of liked what Hades was doing, but prior to Dallas, he Hades just kind of would sit in a spot and just stay there for a really long time, and it's almost like sometimes with the op, you definitely have to force your yeah, you have to impose yourself on the opposing team. And what Sunpius did pretty well for Movistar at Cologne is that he imposed himself. It felt like he chose the right options very frequently, which is probably what propelled them to having as much success as they did. So he was kind of in the zone for that tournament, but I don't. I guess they want someone that's a little bit more active and a little bit more mobile, and for Ents, I guess, to lose somebody like Spinks, who was himself a pretty mobile and active player, to get an opper that's going to do it actually kind of shores up some of the weaknesses that they probably would have had if they didn't make this move. So I guess I'm starting to actually come around to it a little bit, but I just still think that Sun Pius on T side was always such a like non-factor. Like he would end T sides with 2 kills, 3 kills. It was just like you can almost count on it happening, and it had to be the Mopaz show or the Alex show, or the random cheeky death clutch
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
gonna win him around. So that I guess it could be okay. For Nerds, I actually think that Nerds would be a kind of solid pick. I'm not gonna say I know all of his roles on every map if you go 1 for 1 for Spinks, but it is it's kind of funny how Endpoint just keeps churning these guys out.
I know.
Yeah.
They always just get the next talent. But yeah, shout out to them because
Yeah.
if Ents actually have to make that buyout, then everybody at Endpoint gets paid because they all have
True.
they all have like equity in it.
It's
So it's
awesome.
good for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hoping for the best for that. Yeah. I've just enjoyed watching Endpoint bring up like the next generation of players out of nowhere. Like
Also, he's
Flames.
just Israeli. Also,
Yeah.
like, why do they keep getting?
I don't know
Yeah.
what's coming out of there.
What are the chances of that? Yeah,
I
okay,
know.
just a coincidence. Yeah,
Wild
sure.
stuff. So then I guess that kind of leads us into where Spinks would be going, which would be to Vitality, which is, I mean, obviously I think such a huge upgrade in some sense. like having Spinks in any roster, it's kind of like having a Kindar in a roster, right? It's just going to level you up a little bit from where you previously were. I think Masuda might have gotten slightly scapegoated in this team. I will say, like, I don't think it's going to be an immediate patch for this roster. I think that potentially more so of the problem was like the almost like the dynamic between the French and Danish styles, and maybe that more could have come, alleviated the stress with Apex leaving. At least that's my take, right? Apex potentially, getting benched on this roster, and maybe Magic's picking up the IGL role instead. But still, Masuda getting cut from this team and Spinks joining up. Do you think that we'll see anything out of Vitality with this move coming through, or what are your expectations for this roster? You go ahead, Simon. Oh, yeah, you go.
Oh, okay. So this to me is just putting a huge bandage on a problem that you've already addressed, the calling style
Yeah.
for Vitality. And the thing is that there's not always one correct fix when trying to make a broken team into a championship contender, because sometimes if you do just slap in a much better player, it actually just works because he just delivers more frags, and sometimes firepower is what you need in Counter-Strike, which is kind of why the game is awesome, because you don't have to level up your tactics in some super mega brain, like add these layers to your strategies or anything like that. Sometimes it's just literally kill more people, and Spinks will do that very sufficiently over Masuda. And you're right that Masuda got scapegoated for sure, because he was never a problem, but it's just one of those things where it was like knock and device, where even though forget how that's turned out in the last 8 months, but think about in the beginning, it was just better. It's just better because he's just a better player, and so he's gonna deliver more in terms of output. And I think that's kind of where Vitality are headed, which, because Vitality are so close, like they made it to the grand finals at that Blast Fall Spring, or what am I saying? No, Blast Spring Finals. Yeah, okay. So Blast Spring Finals. They made it to the grand finals of that, and if they just had a slightly better player, they could have taken Navi to a very competitive series there, potentially. So I actually think that for Vitality, they're basically just looking at the multitude of problems and actually just picking it's kind of like they're giving themselves a safety net in terms of fragging output, which it just doesn't address the main thing that we're all noticing about the team.
Right. I put them in like a similar category in a different sense as like this main EG roster where I talk about like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I look at Vitality the same way. Like they're 1 foot in on wanting to build a super team around Zaiwu, but I feel like the only true way to do that is if he were to like 1-for-1 replace like Baroki on FaZe, because like I don't see any other leader or any other group of players that can really like make it work because of the language barrier, right? Because like it's obvious that there's still a language barrier, and as much as they try to like say that it's getting better, like it's still obviously there, right? And so with this Vitality roster, I feel like they're just trying to like go all in on just making the best super team that they can, where I feel like it's not going to end up working long term. Like that's my take. I don't think it will, right? I don't think it's going to win them a major, which is probably their end goal. And so I feel like at the end of the day, we're either going to see Zaiwu just completely out of Vitality at some point in the next couple of years, or they need to just go back to a full French roster, which isn't impossible right now. There's like a ton of great French talents, right? But I just feel like like you said, that's like a band-aid for a bigger issue that I feel like isn't solved by just adding in Nico or Spinks or whoever it might be. Like you have to really look at the team from like a ground level and be like, what is the overall issue? And I feel like that's not really what they're addressing. And like you mentioned, like, yeah, maybe if Apex did get benched and they had somebody else lead, and then maybe like they just win away with like anybody French besides Zaiwu, I feel like maybe there's a world where like a full international team, but it's like there's only been one true international team to make it work, and that's Kerrigan's FaZe, right?
Yeah.
So like, are we gonna get Kerrigan out of Magisk? Are we gonna get Kerrigan out of like we already saw it fail with Alexi for what that's worth, right? So it's like I don't see the end in sight. For me, I would say this: Vitality has the biggest French fan base right now. They are like the French team, but they're not even French. You could just go back to full French. You could pick up guys like Hadji and Body. Like there are pieces. There's a world where you could make a really good team around Zaiwu. You could go back to kind of like hard carrying a little bit more. They speak French. Like that could be an option. But when you bring in all these different pieces and you start to take away the idea of like the old Vitality where it was just Zaiwu's going to win us the game with a 1.5 rating and we're going to do our part to set him up. And you bring in a bunch of people who have their own personalities, they have their own fragging style, they have their own, they take up space on the map. I just feel like you're not going to get his full ability and like the team's just really not going to be that great. So that's my take on it. I feel like they're 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They'll make more changes in the future. And I don't know if it's really going to be the best for them. So, but at the end of the day, it can't be a bad thing in terms of like short sight. Like they're obviously going to get a little bit better, but like how much better,
I just think it's a really, really worrying thing that we're adding Spinks to a roster and we're like, this isn't going to be like, a drastic improvement on the team, which it theoretically should be, but if it's not going to be fixing some of the core issues that we've seen them have, like you've got Zaiwu and Spinks on this roster, they should be ideally a title contender. I don't know if that's going to be the case though with them and the issues that they've always had. So that's my one worry. My gut feeling says like this team isn't going to be dealing with FaZe and Navi right now. They're going to be struggling like just almost the same. Maybe they aren't dropping out bottom of events anymore as much as they were like screwing up really bad in Pro League and stuff like that, but overall like I just think that's like the most worrying sign is that it doesn't seem like it's the biggest solution to their problem. I'm hoping to be mistaken though. And
this to me, a lot of this move, what this looks like is a GM that sort of is just about just looking at what the players are saying and hearing them out and saying them all kind of banding together and saying, guys, we would just be better if we had this guy over this insert bottom fragger here, as opposed to having the oversight to actually make a stronger move, which would be today. Yeah, I think if you move forward with Magiska's IGL and you somehow have an option to get 2 players, then there's your pick of the litter in terms of who you can get to replace Apex, who is also, in terms of his fragging ability, pretty low on the totem pole. So you get an Apex and a Masuda replacement. One of them is Spinks. The other, I'm not sure who you could get. If you really want to pick up Movistar, I guess you would go with Mopaz because his stock is very high right now. But in actuality, you could probably get someone more like on the just get D-Haw also. Just get somebody else from Ents. Like if you're already gonna pay that one transfer fee, just go for the second one. And there's probably even more free agents that I'm not thinking of at this very second because I don't have a list in front of me. But you could make a huge swap, and like it's a little bit more of a gamble, whereas this is a little bit safer. But it's kind of gonna what I think the trajectory is gonna be is that Vitality, now that they have this huge boost in firepower, have an opportunity in the next season to actually win one event. Is it going to be? It's going to be maybe like one of those events that kind of feels like Dallas or something, where like a Navi doesn't show up, or a FaZe has a weird bracket run where they just get bounced a little bit early, and then Vitality kind of steals a trophy away, and then they think, we did it, we won a tournament, this is the move we needed. But in actuality, we all know, as people that follow the scene incredibly closely, that this only worked because like of very particular circumstances that gave you a chance to win.
Yeah, I mean, if Spinks and Zaiwu both have like a 1.3 rating, I can't imagine that these guys are going to lose many games. So,
well, that can always work for every team.
I mean, that has potential. But they got IEM China on lock coming up.
Yeah, they'll win some random event like that that Navi and FaZe decide to not show up.
Yeah. So I mean, we kind of covered that quite nicely. We can talk about G2. This is what I was kind of very excited to talk about with you with, because he did that little article for HLTV. It's very cool, very informative. But kind of defending that move of JKS to to G2, right? And again, I think this was kind of everyone's thought, and it wasn't really like it didn't like pop into my brain until I heard someone else say it. But I was like, you got Monacy, you got Hunter, you got Nico, and you got your IGLs kind of floating in and out. Whoever. There is that massive odd man out, that massive like player that didn't have a big buyout or is an up and comer or a young player, and that's Jax, right? Like he doesn't have any like legendary status to his name. Hunter's been off the walls this year. He's been very, very solid. So I think that it's just like simply put an upgrade, just because I think JKS is I think he can play to the level of his team, and his team is going to be very, very good. At least that's kind of what I gathered out of how well he did in some of the Kato events. But talk me through some of your thought processes and your kind of defense of this move, Maui.
So one thing that I actually think G2 was underrated at before was that their T-side round win percentage was always actually pretty serviceable at most events. It wasn't I wouldn't say every single event. Like Dallas, they had a pretty bad T-side, if I remember, but a lot of the events in the beginning of this roster, that 5-man with Alexi, with Monacy, had very solid T-sides, but then their CT sides is where you could see that they're let down by the fact that they had Alexi B, that they had Jax, and Jackson anchor roles it kind of, to me, sometimes felt like Shocks in anchor roles where you're not always going to get anything out of it, and he even might make a literally just wrong choice where the idea in that moment was to stay alive, and he decided to peak again for some reason. And so that's where Jax's decision making, people probably overlooked it because he's a nice guy, and JKS is just simply so much better in so many of the positions that he's going to be playing, and a lot of them are actually similar. I think he's going to get he didn't play. He played Pit on Inferno for FaZe when they played Kato and won, so he was really strong at that, and he's going to take that from Jax, I think. Or yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to take that from Jax, and then he's going to get to play I think A on Mirage. So that's something that he used to do, and that's like, he's just really good at that.
Yeah.
He's better than Jax's, and I'm not gonna go through every single position, but
Yeah.
basically, like, he has a handful of roles that he would overlap with either Alexi or Jax in terms of their CT spots, and if he gets to choose which ones he wants, he probably gets. Let me just throw out a number, like 6 out of 7 maps, he'll get what position he wants on every map for CT side. So T side, what I like is that he kind of has that slower lurk presence, and just kind of hearing that Xtaz said in reply to one of my tweets that Hunter kind of just did that because we just needed somebody to do that, not because we actually always want him to do that. And now JKS just gets to fill those positions. Like, this is just, in terms of roles, this is just a dream. This is a dream situation for G2 in terms of picking up JKS. But where I am not sold is that, yes, they get a much better anchor at one of the sites in JKS for either Alexi or for Jax, but Hooksy is just worse. Hooksy is just worse as an individual. Like, he is not going to play either of those remaining spots to any level, any serviceable degree. But so you have to make sure that people are helping him out, and that's going to be something that people probably target when they do play G2. But you probably don't have to worry about JKS. That's what I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, I feel like okay, I looked at this roster move immediately and I was like, this is so good because I have a lot of empathy for Alexi, actually. I feel like he was maybe a little bit scapegoated. And my take on this is like, if you go back and watch him, and I'm an in-game leader, so I kind of really feel this. But when you go back and you watch Alexi in every team he ever played, he was playing these rotator positions on CT side, like historically connector on Mirage, stuff like that. Like he was like like a pseudo budget, glaive at one point, right? Like really aggressive, getting some entries, getting in your face, right? And you bring him in, and his first position on like Mirage, which Mirage was a staple map for G2 and needed to be a good map, he's playing Daddy B.
Yeah.
And like, if I'm any other team and I'm looking at this guy playing Daddy B, who, for lack of better words, just like isn't a great fragger. He's not gonna like handle his own per se. Like, I'm gonna try to abuse that guy, right? But to make matters worse, like at some point they ended up saying like, screw it, we're gonna switch him in Jax. And they put Jax to Daddy B and then they put Alexi to A, which would have made more sense from the get-go just in general. And it's like even in game leader who's gonna be a high communicator, he's gonna be somebody that facilitates rotations, he's gonna be somebody that likes to get in your face. He'll go 1-for-1 for you gladly, right? And you're just putting him in a position where going 1-for-1 is actually the worst thing you can do, right? In these anchor positions. So I feel like from the get-go, he was screwed. And then on T side, what I really like about seeing like JKS come into the mix is that like we've been watching this version of G2 play where Nico is just like sitting in Palace on Mirage for like 50 seconds, literally doing zero for the team. And it's like, that's horrible. Like, if I was in game leading that team, like, there's no way I'm letting Nico just sit AFK in Palace for 50 seconds in tier 1 Counter Strike.
That's
And
wild.
so now you have a guy like JKS who, like, naturally, like, that is kind of his role. That's kind of like how you'd want him to play. And it just frees up Nico to be with the pack more, to get a little bit aggressive. Cause, like, I used to watch some of their demos and it was mind blowing. Jax was like their, he's like their X rifler on the T side, where like you kind of just fill the gap. So if you want to go 2 people underpass, he's 2 people underpass. If you want to go 3 towards A, he's the third towards A. Things like that, right? And there was rounds where like Nico would get a spawn, and you just want to take this spawn and like run up catwalk on Mirage. Who was lurking Palace? Jax. Like they were just literally filling this guy in spots to do a little patch job in their own. It's just like that doesn't make sense to me. So I feel like a lot of people looking from the outside in, they don't see how big this is, but I actually think this G2 roster is poised for championships. Now, how many will be a major? I don't know. It's still all going to live and die by whether or not Nico is the best player in the server, but I think they can be very, very, very good. And also, to touch on the Hooksy point, because he deserves some love, Hooksy is your stereotypical like for lack of a better term, bitch role player. He plays the Deddy Bees of Mirage. He does just like literally give his life away on T side for trade frags. Like he is exactly what you need. So you're taking a guy like Alexi who just wasn't supposed to be meant for any of that, and you're taking him out because it wasn't working, and you're replacing him with somebody who's like literally like a fish in the water. Like he's just gonna run in, jump around a corner. You're gonna trade frag him. Like that's how your T side's gonna facilitate. And on CT side, he's playing these spots, which is going to free up JKS to have all the spots that he wants. Hunter can still play in rotator positions for the most part. Like I love it. I love it. I think they're gonna be great. So hopefully we can see more out of Monacy, and we can see a better Nico as well. And if JKS can do anything close to what he was doing with FaZe for a short period, I think they're gonna be incredible. So
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Hooksy. I want to like just say like there's gonna be 4 very good players on this team, and then there's gonna be Hooksy. Obviously, like you give every IGL the benefit of the doubt, and like I'm sure that if Kerrigan was on Copenhagen Flames, he would have the same rating as Hooksy would right now, right? He just wouldn't be winning games. He'd be like losing more. He wouldn't be able to clean up like a couple finishing kills, but um. I just think he's going to be targeted quite a bit in this team because you don't want to run into Monacy, you don't want to run into Nico, you don't want to run into Hunter, and now with JKS kind of playing in some of these anchored positions, you don't want to run into him either, much less than Jax. So I feel like he's going to get almost abused on this roster, and maybe G2 can start to play around that. Like you almost play a buddy system on CT side, you stick him with like a Hunter or something, and they can play as a duo, but that's my one concern. I just don't know how good individually he's going to be compared to the rest of it. Just kind of they've gotten one kind of misfit role in Jax. He wasn't quite up to snuff with the rest of the players on this team, and they just slotted him in with a Hooksy, and maybe his calling style is going to be better and fit more into this role, but in the grand scheme of things, that's my one concern is they moved a step forward, they moved a step back almost.
Okay. I mean, I'm good on what I said about G2. I think that
yeah.
I would say right now, if I have to like make a prediction though, are they going to be better or worse? Better. Better
Yeah.
is my prediction for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. I
Fair
still think
enough.
it's like I'd grade it like an A move overall. Like I just think what they're doing is just like it's good for them.
Yeah.
Like I said though, I still do think like maybe Alexi was like a little bit scapegoated. I think he has more to show in another project
Mhm.
somewhere,
Oh yeah, for
wherever it might
sure.
be.
Yeah.
You know, I also did. I was talking with some friends and I was talking about like where Alexi could go, and I feel like just like completely random, but like take like a partner team that's maybe like a lesser entity. So like maybe like I mean like a Maus or like a Complexity
Oh,
or like a team like that, and I feel like he could just do wonders for them.
Yeah.
But like he's not gonna get back onto like a top 5 team or top 10 team probably in the near future. But I don't know.
I
if
was
he
just
got
hope.
on
Oh, you go ahead.
complexity, that'd be
I know.
so
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
crazy.
Wouldn't it?
It'd be
Wouldn't it? That's
so
that's
actually be an insane move because
yeah.
he's actually better individually than JT, and I mean his calling is more modern, or it's just
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
overall better. Wow, that I mean that's just like so why are you getting everybody's hopes
I
up that's from North America right now?
know.
Because that sounds so sick on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. Um.
Because he could also micro people like Grim. Like this
Yeah.
is so that'd be so
Yeah.
perfect. You could
Yeah.
I mean,
he
you could
could
micro
micro
almost the
Halzer,
whole team.
like yeah, everybody feels like they'd be down to get microed
Yeah.
on complexity. Like he could have free reign over that team. And the
Mhm.
thing is that they actually have such strong ability in terms of individuals that I don't even think it would go that badly. Like that could be oh my god, that could be like his next 2018 ENTS project
No,
right
that's what
Yeah.
I'm
there.
saying. Like, I feel like nobody's really like spouted that one at all. But like, I was thinking about this with friends, and I'm like, in a world where they could make something like that happen, it makes a lot of sense because he doesn't really have too much of a reason to say no. You know, me, I don't
Right.
know. I don't actually know the guy, but like from where
Yeah.
his stock is at, right? Like, it makes a lot of sense. Like, that'd be great for him. But yeah,
And okay, looking person to person, I think Sergey is better than probably anybody on complexity today, but I don't think Floppy is too far off, and I don't think Grim could be too far off if he got microed a lot more, if he
yeah,
made more correct decisions in terms of his macro movements. So, like thinking of it one to one, like I'm pretty sure Floppy is better than like an X7, and I'm pretty
yeah.
sure the thing is that like probably the only two people that were better on that old ENTS roster were just Sirge and Alu were better than the players that are currently on complexity. But then I think that even like X7 was probably worse than anybody on complexity today. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be down. I'd be down for that. That'd be so super sweet. So, I mean, do you have anything else really in the top 10? I guess we could maybe touch on STY staying and Navi, but that's nothing new. I think
Probably
that's.
the more interesting one. I think Alex would like this is like the big move. I mean, that's
Oh
maybe
yeah.
something a little bit.
The big for big. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is what I wanted. So basically so I So when Big actually made the move to get Crimbo, uh, their CFO messaged me and he's like, "Guess who it's for?" And I instantly just typed Tizian, and he's like, "Oh."
Oh
He's
no.
like, and
Yeah.
he kind of was like, "Oh no, it's for Keto," and I was like, "Oh, okay, sure then." But then I was still happy to see Crimbo get the bump up, but I
Yeah.
really wanted it to be Crimbo for Tizian,
Yeah.
because and so for it to be the lineup that I originally hoped when I heard the Crimbo news that it was gonna that I wanted it to be. I think I actually God, I'm so high on Big, but like don't people think that this is good for them? Don't people think that Keto
Yeah.
is better than Tizian? Because Tizian, sure, he does a couple like quote unquote hard rolls, but Rops does a lot of those rolls too, and he doesn't look as bad as Tizian does. You know, sometimes Tizian is literally on the other side of the map, is not helping the team at all, has a 1v1 fight, and just loses the fight, and then they lose so much map control in a split second. If you put Keto there, Keto maybe isn't as cerebral a player as Tizian. Maybe he makes a couple worse choices, like 1 to 2 per game, but he's gonna win more fights than Tizian by a decent enough margin that maybe he makes a wrong move, but maybe he gets a kill doing the wrong move. And so this to me makes Big kind of like just a little bit better overall. Like if I have to just put a little bit of a grade on it, it's like a it's like a C plus move for them. It's a definitely good move in my eyes, but is it gonna actually get them to a consistent top 6, top 7? Maybe not, but could it bump them up like a couple spots on a over a Furia that's been kind of wacky, over a Mouse that seemed kind of fluky? Yeah, it could at least I think for Big keep them in the top 10. That's how I'll put it. Keep them there.
Yeah. I like it. I think it's a good move. I think I don't know. It's I thought Keto being removed was kind of like not scapegoat, but like it was kind of one of those things where like Big was just stagnating. They needed to make a change. Um, they just chose. I think they chose wrong.
Yeah.
So if anything, I think maybe it's like a little revitalized. You know, maybe the ego got pounded a little bit having to play on the academy team for a few games, and then like You know, I always look at him, or Keto rather, as like as a guy who has a lot of like individual like raw talent. Like I actually like his aim is crisp. You ever watch this guy just play with like a
Yeah.
deagle? It's like sickening, right? But you know, like you said, he was maybe not like cerebral as cerebral as the other players, especially Tizian. But I think overall they have a very good roster now. Like you said, they can definitely go up a couple spots. Not really probably gonna they're not gonna look at championships though, unless like Crimbo just becomes the next big thing, or unless Tabson becomes Nico. They have to. They still need to like really play really well. But I think Searson is still an incredible player. I think like they have every piece they need now to make it work. They have the star power. They have the roles lined up. I think it's really good. So yeah, I'm excited.
I think
I'm
in
excited for
kind of
sure.
a similar way, they could maybe potentially like tussle at a IEM China, but it's always going to come down to, you know, can they beat like the top 4 teams? I think again, Vitality got a small buff. G2's got a pretty decent buff as well. So like those are more teams in competition. And while everyone's else, this is kind of always the case with Big though, right? Like it's every team that makes these big changes, these big upgrades, and of course they're sticking with. I mean, now with Tabs and kind of extending that contract, there's no doubt like they're in it for the long haul, but they're always going to be hovering in top 10. I don't think they'll move too far past that.
Yeah, yeah, right. You don't really, if you're doing a national team in Germany
Yeah,
where CS is just not the biggest game
yeah.
for them right at present, it's tough to really aspire to be the best team in the world. Whereas, like, look at the other international teams that are thriving right now. I mean, uh, or national teams, I guess. You basically have Navi, who's kind of, well, I guess it's Ukraine slash Russia for that one, which is kind
Mhm.
of, it's dicey, but it is what it is. You have Cloud9 that are just basically Russian with one Kazakhstani guy, and then you have basically no one other than I guess Astralis, if you really count their number 4 status to be that legitimate right now. But Denmark, Sweden, they've been Counter Strike countries for just like for 20 years now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, you will want to close out with some rants. We cover all the top 10 stuff. I mean,
Sure.
we can.
I don't know how this part goes, so what do you
Okay,
Yeah,
gotta
so
tell me?
I actually had something that I for this rant, I guess we could just kind of maybe like structure it around one
yeah,
thing
sure.
I brought up to Exner. I kind of want to get your take. Now you spent a lot of time around different TOs, a lot of teams, a lot of players. I want to get your take because we are a grassroots uh production here. But anyways, what is your take on like how we can fix NACS? Okay, this is like the same boring regurgitated topic, but still nothing's happening. I want your take because you've been across the pond doing bigger and better, and it's great to see. But how do we get everybody else, you know, moving forward? Like what do you see the biggest problems? How do you fix it? Like what is your idea if you have any?
I I think the biggest thing is kids need to start going to therapy when they're younger. Like I can't, the amount of wasted talent in NA is so unspeakable because someone had a bad attitude. Like just going through the list right now, we have the newest member who's joining the crew is Glacia. And
Mhm.
before that, like we had Sixy who threw away some opportunities. We had Infinite who threw away some opportunities. And all these, like, the thing is that all of them, if they just had their mental a little bit more figured out earlier on, they would have made it. They would have made it so like and become that next talent. And it's so heartbreaking to see that the biggest enemy to so many of the players in North America is basically their own just anguish just getting the better of them, or their whatever it like the teenage angst and basically being too edgy online has gotten the hold of so many people. Even like I'm not I don't know what's going on with those Timmermen guys, but like whatever they were doing is also just so dumb. Like just stop being brats, just stop being twerps, just like
Yeah,
start being more well adjusted and recognizing that what you do on the internet has serious repercussions even in social interactions. Like even if it just feels like a post you're making on Discord or something you're saying on Twitter or the way you just like I don't know, the words you say matter, and just learn that it's not that, like, I wanna say cancel culture or anything, but just, like, it can hurt your career. It can really hurt your career significantly if if you say the wrong things, or you interact with people in a way that people are not really, like, that doesn't appeal to many people. So, this is, like, it's not like a TO thing, it's not like an up and coming, like, a cash injection, because all those things would be great. If you got more tournaments here, if you got more cash injection, those would help. They like undoubtedly would help, but we're not in a position right now to put that money into this ecosystem. Like, we're not the ones doing it. But if it were there, sure, people would move back from Valorant. Like, we
Mhm.
would get more players again. But so for what we have in the space right now, the only thing we can be in control of is ourselves, and that is something that all of these players who have messed up, and be given second chances on, need to make sure that their next chance is one that really matters, and that you just be nice to people. Like, it's not really actually that hard. Like, I feel like Stamina, when I was coming up in this space, like, I made one enemy throughout the entire time, and he kind of was like a kind of an enemy of like everybody that was on that AZO roster, any of the AZO rosters. And I don't really think that I had this I don't know. From your perspective, did it seem like I had a reputation of being a brat? Because I don't think there was. I made sure that, like, at this
Mm,
age that was not the case with me, and
Yeah,
I think
no.
that helps me a lot because most people like me. I don't think that's like, yeah. I don't think I'm going out
No,
on a limb saying that.
for
No.
sure. And we were talking the other day. We were talking about like a bunch of FPL players. We were talking about how like bad of a space FPL can be and stuff like that. And one of the things we brought up was like, it is actually just boring as shit to play FPL now because like I'm playing with people that I can't even like call friends. Like I used to play games where like we would just sit in TeamSpeak till like 6 in the morning. The queue died at 3, and just like 9 of us are sitting in TeamSpeak. Probably could have launched another game, but we're just like shooting this shit and hanging out. People like enjoyed each other. You'd like have a little bit of banter here and there in games and like have some fun, but like there's like no personality. People don't enjoy each other. Everybody wants what's worst for the other team. Like, I mean, like, not even to call him out, but it's just like this tweet right here. Like Danny just tweeted. I just saw this on Twitter. He's like,
What
I
did
think
he
it's only
do?
fair. I think it's only fair we thank ATK for not playing the first qualifier! Exclamation mark. And he's like clowning the fact that these guys can't play. It's like everybody in NA just fucking hates each other for no reason. Like I
Oh,
I just feel
yeah.
like everybody hates each other and we don't build each other up, and like nobody really wants to be friends. And like, yeah, you talk about it like just being twerps. Like at the start, I definitely did the same shit. Like everybody hated me for like a long period of time, and that was like something that I was working like really hard to fix. And it's like so many people just hate each other in this scene, and I feel like, yeah, we can talk about the infrastructure and all the resources and all that shit, but like at the end of the day, we just gotta be able to like play Counter Strike and not have a team implode every 3 months. You know, it's like more important. So
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
that's one thing that you mentioned. I know that you're in like the process of rebuilding a new team, and I want to give a quick shout out because this was very interesting to me. But you talked about that JBA guy, and JBA has
yeah,
always been like a guy that's watched some of my like demo reviews, and I do very little. Like, he's tuned into some of my streams every once in a while, but he's very like, I've seen this in him, but very hardworking. He's also, like, you told me that he's reading like self-help books at 18. Like, I
yeah,
don't think there's a lot more that you could do as a North American player than like individually, play the game, obviously, do all that, but also grow your mindset outside of games. This is another like aspect. I think Thorn was talking about it on one of his streams, but like Monty made his League of Legends team read like Art of War, and they asked like the question, what does this have to do about League of Legends? Like, I don't know, like the most like strategic, like, know your enemy type of deal in Art of War, like very important reading, and they can't process the fact that it's like very important to like, their competitive side. So yeah, I want to give a quick shout out to JBA because he's one of the good ones for sure. But I mean, I've obviously thought that, but I haven't heard it verbalized as well as you just said Maui. Just therapy's good.
And not everybody has access to therapy,
Yeah.
obviously, but at least being introspective enough in moments where you can see that, hey, what I just did was detrimental to my future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that again. Like,
Yes.
immediately recognizing the mistakes that you made and being able to move forward with them. not just in the game, because they wouldn't. Most of these players wouldn't be at the ECL level if they couldn't recognize the mistakes that they made in their own game. But then it's what you do outside the game that matters just as much, if not more, because the truth of the matter is that most people are not going to become tier 1 pros,
Yeah.
but they can become better people. And CS is a really great community, or it has the potential to be a great community in North America. If people were just nicer to each other, you would develop better interpersonal friendships. And who knows, like once you end up like having these friendships with people who are across the country, you could like it could change your life so much for the better in terms of just literally having that connection. Even if you guys don't make it as pros in the end of the at the end of the whatever, like I know right now, like I have a couple friends in North America that I would never have had if not for CS, and they weren't even always people on my teams.
Yeah.
You know, so but now that I can hit those people up, it's just so it just improves your life
Yeah.
quality so drastically to have friendships that you made through the internet, like, and to overlook that and think you're just going to stay in your little tight bubble of your team versus the world is just, it's so short-sighted in terms of not only like your future prospects to maybe get on a new team if your current team doesn't work out, but also literally your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, me and you literally met each other in 2015. It's crazy. So it's like, it's true. I mean, it just, you make connections with people. And yeah, I think it's a little bit weird because like esports is just like a different realm. And everybody's so used to like, you make friends in traditional sports and you make your best friends and you have those people for life. And it's like, nowadays kids are only on the internet, especially like these COVID kids too, like who literally
Yeah.
missed out on like some of the best years of their life and they're only on internet. So it's like, yeah, these relationships do matter. People have to kind of put a little bit more stock in them and understand that they do matter. And like burning bridges over somebody shitting on you in a pug is pretty
Right.
ridiculous, you know? So it's
So
like
so pointless. It's like
so
you don't
dumb.
even know why you're mad at people sometimes, like, or
No.
even like why you had to talk shit in such a abrasive manner. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
my rule of thumb with shit talk always was just like, like if it sticks to the game, like, dude, bro, your aim is shit, it's fine. But once you start also bringing in insults from just other, I don't know, some of the heinous shit I saw where like why people got banned for saying things about like people's family or their personal lives, it's just like so uncalled for. And like that one little chuckle you have then is not ever going to be worth the fact that you now you're labeled as this cretin for the rest of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. I
Yep.
agree.
No
Very
doubt.
based Maui.
Based Maui for sure. That was great. I mean
I think
that
that is
that sums
go
up the
yeah.
all of my rants too. I didn't have anything super special. I just said my rant was give Hex a chance.
Yeah.
But
No, true actually. Hopefully people are a little bit more welcoming. I saw some like Smuya was memeing the announcement and I don't even think God, Neelan, I don't know how great his English is, but like Smooya was like, looks like a sick roster, man. Thumbs up. And Neelan's like, thanks, dude. And like Smooya was being sarcastic. It was just
yeah.
such a dick.
Yeah, right, right.
That's funny.
But I had hoped people would give him like a little bit of
Yeah.
a chance. I think it's really cool to see a guy like Hex because when do we see these people? The last one was like OC to Liquid, and maybe that's even just a different tier, but still, I think it's really cool. So
100%.
yeah, wraps things up. I think this was a really good one, and thanks for coming on, Maui.
Yes, thank you so much, Maui. Do you have anything you want to shout
out? Just shout out to, let me read chat. Shout out Viz. Shout out Viz. Shout out all of EG's teams.
There you go.
root for all of them, even though I have to publicly tell it how it is if they're bad.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Awesome.
I'm never rooting against them.
There you go. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching as well. Hopefully we'll be back. I think we're targeting for Blast after Blast fall groups, I think it is. So make sure you tune in for that episode. We'll be back soon. And peace out. Everyone enjoy your weekend.